Hey there, this is Darlene Michele with the Friends of Fairview. We're a nonprofit organization dedicated to preserving Fairview Cemetery right here in New Albany, Indiana, and of course the legacies and the stories of the people that are buried here. And the story I want to tell you today is the grave robber story. Yes, you heard that right. A grave robber story that happened right here in Fairview Cemetery in February of 1890. So let's go. Okay, so first I will relate the story to you, and then I'm going to, we'll go to the grave sites, the family plots of the two graves that were the targets of the grave robbers on that night. So, but first the story. The story takes place on February 22nd of 1890. 21st, 22nd, I think it was the 22nd of 1890. But before we get to the actual grave robber story, we have to backtrack earlier in that day, the same day. A very well-dressed young man, gentleman, very well-dressed young man came walking into the cemetery through the beautiful gates right up to the cemetery office and was talking to the sexton, the cemetery sexton, who's basically the caretaker, the overseer of the cemetery. A Mr. Schrader. So he was asking Mr. Schrader where he could find William Deeble. William Deeble was a cemetery, like his assistant, who worked in the cemetery. And so he was asking specifically for where William Deeble was located. He needed to talk to him. So Mr. Schrader points out the direction that Mr. Deeble, his worker, was working in the northern part of the cemetery. He points to the direction and sends the gentleman on his way to go find William Deeble. So the gentleman is walking up the road in the direction that he was pointed towards, and the sexton did happen to notice, though, before he turned to continue his duties that he was working on, he did notice that that gentleman stopped right at the corner of where one road meets and goes into another, where a newly fresh grave was there. A person had been freshly buried. The day before, an Edwin Pierce, who was a police officer, he had been buried just the day before. And so his grave was freshly marked, and it was right there near the corner. So he just happened to notice that this guy stopped and was really paying attention to that grave and the location of it and all of that before he continued on to find William Deeble. Well, the sexton, Mr. Schrader, just kind of, went about his business, didn't really think much about it, but he did just happen to notice that, but kept going on with his work. So the man finds William Deeble, and he asks him to show him where two fresh graves, two newly buried people were, where their graves were. One was Edwin Pierce, which he had already noticed, and the other was a Thomas Johnson. Now, Edwin Pierce, he died at about 32 years old. He was a police officer here in New Albany. He died of consumption, which back in those days is what they called tuberculosis. So he died of tuberculosis. It was not an unexpected death. He had been struggling for a while. So his friends and family were bracing for his passing. He had just died and had been buried the day before all of this that I'm relating to you occurred. So the second grave that he wanted to know the location of was Thomas Johnson. Now, Thomas Johnson was about 30 years old, a young man. He died unexpectedly. He was born and raised here in New Albany, but he died in Chicago where he had a position. So he first started out working over in Louisville. He was married. He had a wife named Sally Cotton, and they had a daughter named Nancy. And they were living in Louisville for a period of time because he was working for the Louisville-Nashville Railroad in the ticket office there as a clerk. He was a clerk in that railroad company, Nashville Railroad, and they lived in Louisville at the time. Then, just a couple years before his death, he got a position in Chicago working for the Wagner Palace Car Company, as the production supervisor. That was located in Chicago. The main headquarters for that was in New York, but they obviously also had one in Chicago because he was working there, and he's listed in the city directories as working there, and he was the production supervisor for that. Now the Wagner, I just found it interesting because I was like, what is this Palace Car Company? What the heck is that? So I started researching it and found out that it was like the main competition for the Pullman Palace Car Company. Remember Pullman? The Pullman Porters, the Pullman cars, the beautiful sleeper cars. Well, Wagner was also making those and was the main competition for the Pullman car company at one point. So that's where Thomas was working at the time of his death, in Chicago, for the Wagner car company at the time of his death. And he died unexpectedly. So he was living there with his wife and their daughter. They were in Illinois, in Chicago. So at his death, his body was returned here to New Albany to be buried in the family plot with his parents' family plot. And so he had just been buried the week before this incident. So Thomas Johnson buried the week before, Edwin Pierce buried the day before this incident happened, this grave robbing attempt. So now Diebel shows the gentleman where the two bodies are buried, thinking that he's a relation or wanted to pay his respects or something like that. So he shows him where they're located. As he is walking down to Edwin Pierce's family plot, he showed him the Johnson family plot, took him down to the Edwin Pierce family plot, which is down this road. It's a little bit of a walk, but down the road, but he had already noted that, remember I said. So then the man takes out a hefty roll of bills, of money, and hands him a few dollars and says, and thanks him for taking him, walking the distance with him to show him where those two graves were. And William Diebel tried to give the money back and say, no, it's just my job. So no, he tried to turn the money away. Well, the man kept insisting that he take it. So finally Diebel takes it just to shut him up. And then the man says, I can give you more money if you will just turn your back and not say anything, because they were going to come and take those two bodies that night. And Diebel could earn an extra $20 per body if he would just keep his mouth shut and not say anything at all. That he would kind of help them, and then not say anything, so they could come in and steal those bodies that night. Well, Diebel went ahead and agreed to it, just to make him think that he was okay, that he was on board. But after that man left, he actually jumped the gate over here where he was talking to Diebel. He jumped the 8th Street gate, and that's the gate that the robbers came to when they attempted the robbery, and I'll show you that in a minute. So he jumped the gate and he kept it going, headed toward the river to transportation to wherever he was heading. So Diebel then takes the money and he goes to the sexton and he tells Mr. Schrader the whole story and what that man had just said to him. And so Mr. Schrader calls the mayor of the city, which at that time was Morris McDonald, and tells him the whole story, that there was going to be a grave robbery attempt. And so the mayor alerted the police, and so they set up this plot, and not only alerted the police, the mayor also alerted the brothers of Thomas Johnson that their brother's body was in danger of being stolen. And so they hatched a plot. The mayor, there were 2 policemen, and then a friend of Edmund Pierce's, who was also a policeman, that came, Edmund Pierce. So his name was, I think, Edward Hopper, something like that. And he came to also watch over the body of Edwin Pierce. But then the 2 brothers of Thomas Johnson, Nathaniel and James, they came, and then they were here with William Diebel. So they set up this plot to watch the graves and see if they could catch the robbers. If the robbers did show up, they'd be ready to take them, arrest them, and stop them. So over by Pierce's body were stationed the 2 officers. It was Officer Hennessy and Officer Cannon. And then Edwin's friend Hopper, Mr. Hopper. They were down there by Edwin Pierce's grave. Over here, where I'm standing, I'm over by the Johnson grave, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But his brothers, Nathaniel and James, and then William Diebel, the cemetery worker, were stationed over here by the Johnson family plot. Now, they didn't know if they were going to show up or not, if it was going to really happen. So they prepared, and they were planning to just set up a regular watch on the graves to make sure no one stole the body any other day. If it didn't happen that night, that it wouldn't happen another night. So they set up some tarps so that they could, if it rained or whatever, they would still be able to stay and watch. And they were going to settle in and keep watch over their brothers and their friend's grave for days or weeks or whatever it was going to take to be sure that the body was safe. So they came to the cemetery. They set up their watch about 8 o'clock that night, and set up their tarps, set up their spots, and got all positioned. It wasn't raining. It was a pretty decent day. It had been not inclement weather throughout the day, but as the night progressed, a storm started rolling in. And so after they had been sitting here for about 4 hours, the storm started to roll in. They heard a church bell that rang around 11 o'clock that night from the St. Mary's Church. And so the church bell rang and kind of let them know about what time it was. And then the storm started rolling in, and it was a bad storm, okay? So here we are on the night of the grave robbers story, the grave robbers that came and tried to steal bodies here in the cemetery. So just let's set the stage here. So the grave robbers, I've told you where everybody is positioned, all of the people that are watching for the grave robbers, where they are positioned. We have Thomas Johnson's brothers and Diebel right across from that plot. We have the two officers and Edwin Pierce's friend right across from his family plot just down the street here. Okay? And that's where everyone is positioned. Now, they were right by the Johnson grave site, is right by the gate that the robbers were going to attempt to come by. So this was right by that entrance, okay, which I'll show you all of that here in a minute so you can understand how everything was positioned. So imagine now we've got all of the people in place. They've been waiting for hours, okay? It's been a pretty decent day, not so bad, but now we've got a storm rolling in. It's dark, we hear the church bell go, and then thunder. And then it gets more intense. And then we've got lightning, and we're in a full-blown thunderstorm. And according to the articles that I read regarding this story, it was an intense storm. So they waited and waited. They didn't stop their vigil. The storm wasn't going to deter them from the vigil. And it didn't deter the robbers from their attempt either to do their dastardly deed. So they're sitting here and they hear a horse carriage. If they had been waiting for hours, the storm is going, and they hear a carriage come up and stop at the gate. Okay. Then they hear someone gets out of the carriage as they're watching, jumps over the fence, and walks over to Thomas Johnson's body. He knew exactly where it was. And then after he looks, he's kind of looking around. He goes back to the fence. He signals to the people in the cart. And then 3 more come out. There were 5 people in the carriage. 4 that came into the cemetery to do the deed, and 1 that stayed in the carriage to be ready to pull away quickly. And so the 4 that came in, they went to Johnson's body, and they took the flowers that had been put there from just the funeral before, the week before when this funeral was there, and they began to dig. Okay, so now they're digging in the grave to try and dig him up. Then for some reason they stop digging. They had only had just started, and they decide to do Edwin Pierce first. To go down and do Pierce first because he was down the way, and then do this one last because it was near the gate. So they thought they must have, apparently the account from the brothers was that there was some kind of argument going on, probably about whether to continue to do Thomas first Thomas Johnson or whether to go down and get Edwin Pierce. It seems to be that those who wanted to go to Pierce first won out the argument, if that's what they were arguing about, because they left their spade here and they started walking down toward Edwin Pierce's grave. Now, remember, Thomas Johnson's brothers are just right here, right across the street from where this is all happening. So as the grave robbers leave the grave and start heading down to the other plot to go find Edwin Pierce's grave, which they knew where it was, but to go there, the brothers jump out with Diebel, and the brothers yell, "Halt! Stop! Throw up your hands!" Some of them, the two white men, so it was two white men when they could see. Remember, this is dark. This is not like all well lit up. It's dark. They're not seeing everything clearly, but it was two white men and two African American men that were the four that came into the cemetery. So the two white men and one of the African American men threw up their hands to stop, to halt, but the other one went running. The other one that went running toward this family vault, which you actually can see right behind me, because I'm literally over here by the Johnson monument or family plot where this all happened. So went running to that family vault right here, the John Briggs family vault. And when he got around that vault running, a rifle shot you could hear a rifle shot, and he cried out, and he had been shot. And so the doctors then, according to the recounting from the Johnson brothers, asked to go see if he was okay, that they were doctors. They said, "We're doctors, we'll go see. If he's okay, can we be allowed to go see?" So they went over there to see what had happened and found that he was dead. So he had been killed. Now, the description, pretty graphic, said that he had been shot through the back, and that with a 12 gauge rifle, and that it had gone through his back, came out his front by the would have been the left side, because his heart came out. Pieces of his heart came out, is what it said, and some of the balls hit the side of the mausoleum, which then the stonemasons had to come and repair after the death, after the incident, had to come and repair where that happened. And so at this time, so while this is all happening, the officers are running up from Edwin Pierce and Hopper. They hear all the commotion and they come running up, and there's kind of a little bit of a scuffle going on. Not too bad, because by the time the officers came up, they told them to halt, to put their hands up, and then they ended up going to jail, those three. So turns out that the two white men were doctors from the Louisville Medical School, or Medical School, University College over there in Louisville. And they needed cadavers for their students to learn anatomy with. And so they had been going around and robbing cemeteries. They were not allowed to take any bodies from Louisville, so they were raiding cemeteries in southern Indiana at that time to get cadavers. They had a rule where they were trying to just do like paupers and people that were friendless and had nobody that cared about them. But for some reason, they were going to go ahead and try and take Johnson and Pierce's body. They did not succeed. The three were captured. They did go to trial. And then the trial, during the trial, which lasted several months, and then there was like an argument, a contention going on between New Albany and Louisville. They were well-respected doctors, and the whole doctors community, both here in New Albany and over there in Louisville, did not want to see them prosecuted because they understood the situation. However, the families of the bodies and the families of those who had people buried here were in outrage. It was outrage. There were people that just wanted to see them just shot and killed. It was a big, huge to-do, and it got to be nasty. The newspaper guy here in Louisville, the Louisville newspapers and the Courier Journal and the Louisville newspapers and the New Albany newspapers were having this tit for tat that was going back and forth regarding the whole thing. And of course, the Louisville was sticking up for the doctors. New Albany here was saying that they were dastardly scoundrels and they deserved to be prosecuted. And the people here in New Albany were upset because their graves of their loved ones had been desecrated, or they were worried that they might have been. So it was a big deal. So what happened? Eventually, after just a few days, they were here in the New Albany jail when they first got arrested, but then they were taken to Jeffersonville for their safety because there were very upset people here in New Albany, as you can imagine. And so they were tried over there. Now, they actually, in the end, were acquitted because the jury decided that they never actually stole a body. They only just, took flowers off and started digging, but they never actually stole a body, so they can't be convicted of stealing a body when they didn't do it, even though they were in the process of doing it. So that's how it ended. Very frustrating for a lot of people, but that is the end of the story. So let's go and see the different grave sites. Let's go see where Edwin Pierce is buried. Let's go see where Thomas Johnson is buried and who's buried with them. And then after that, we'll wrap it up. Okay, so I'm here at the grave site of Edwin Pierce, and here he is. Let's introduce you. So there's Edwin Pierce. He was just 32 at the time of his death. He was a police officer here in New Albany, and he died of consumption, which was really tuberculosis. That's just what they called tuberculosis back in the 1800s. They called it consumption, but he passed away from tuberculosis. It was something he had struggled with for a little while, so it was expected that he would pass away. So his death was not a surprise. It was not unexpected. So let's see who he's buried here with. Okay, so I'm here in front of his father. He's buried with his parents. So this is Wesley Pierce from Delaware. And then right on the other side of this is his mother, Rebecca. Let's go see her. So here's Rebecca on the other side of the monument. So if we step back just a little bit, here's Edwin on this side. Then his mother is on this side right here, and his father is on this side. So their names are all on the same monument. They're just, their names are just engraved on a different side of the monument. So my guess is that they are buried right here where the monument stands, the three of them. They're the only three names on the monument. And let's just, for verification, show you where this is. There is the Mexican War Memorial right here. And then all of the New Albany, Fairview Cemetery veterans that fought in the war that are buried here in Fairview, many of them are buried right here with that Mexican War Monument. So that's right where the Pierce Monument is, right by the Mexican War Monument. So Edwin and his mother and father, Wesley and Rebecca, Pierce, are buried right here where this monument is located. But that's not all that's here. So let's see who else is here. Okay, so I'm here with Edwin's brother, Harry E. Pierce, and then his wife, Gertrude S. is also buried here. And then look where we are. There's the monument. So they are literally just right next to the monument. So Harry and his wife, Gertrude. So Edwin's brother, Harry. So let's see who else. All right, so who else is here is we have two other headstones. We have Bayard Pierce, and then this one, which is so hard to read. Actually, the words are on the other side, but it's so difficult to read. These are two sons of Wesley. So Edwin's father, Wesley, Edwin Pierce, who's there with his parents. His father, Wesley's brother, James, is here. and his wife are here as well. Ann Taylor, I believe her name was, and they're buried here along with their 2 sons, 2 of them. So they had 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. The daughter got married and is elsewhere. She's not buried here. But the 2 sons are here. So we have Bayard Pierce. And then this is little Wesley Webb Pierce, who didn't even make it to 2 years old. So that's who's here. So these are 2 sons of Wesley Pierce. His brother James is buried here as well. This whole family plot is owned by Wesley and James Pierce, the 2 brothers. Wesley's son was Edwin, who died of tuberculosis and was one of the targets of the body snatchers, the grave robbers here in Fairview. So, and then James, Wesley's brother, is buried here with his wife and 2 of their children. But that's not all. Let's see who else is here. Here we have Silas Pierce, native of Delaware. So this is James and Wesley Pierce's father. I'm thinking the mother, when I was researching the family, it looks like she passed away in Delaware and never came to New Albany with the family because I can't find her anywhere. I'm thinking she died in Delaware, and according to Ancestry, it seemed like she passed away in Delaware, and then Silas and his family moved this way. It doesn't look like Silas remarried. I don't see another wife. When I was researching, I couldn't find another wife for him, so I don't think he remarried. But he headed here with some of his children, and they are buried here with him. So this whole plot was owned by his 2 sons, Wesley and James, and he's buried here in the plot. So here is their father. And then right here at the empty place, I think, is where James and his wife are buried. And then of course, just right over here, we have Bayard and little Wesley Webb, who died before he was 2. And then right back here we have Edwin and his parents, Wesley and Rebecca. And then we have Wesley's other son, Harry, and his wife Gertrude are here. So Edwin's brother Harry and his wife Gertrude are here. And that's who's all in this plot. So we have Father Silas, Silas's son Wesley, his wife, and his son Edward. And then his son Harry and his wife Gertrude are here. And then we have Silas's son James and his wife, which I believe they're buried here in an unmarked area. They do not have headstones, but they're located as being buried here in the burial records of Fairview. And then right next to them is their sons Bayard and Wesley Webb. The 2 sons here. Wesley dying when he was just a little boy, just not even a toddler yet. Yes, so that's who's here in the family plot, in the Pierce family plot. Okay, so just real quick, I am right here by the Pierce, where Edmund Pierce was buried, and I already showed you who all is here. But I want to show you where the gate is. So in relation to where Thomas Johnson was buried, and where the monument, the Brigg family vault, and the gate is all this far away. So again, Mexican War Monument, that's where the Pierces are. And all along, this is Main Street. Way at the end, the street ends at the gate. So that's how far, where this gate is right here. This whole long walk down the path. Wow, trying to do this. It's hard to do this with the video. But anyway, you can see the gate is right here. It ends at the end of the street, and that's where Johnson is, because his family plot is over there by the gate, as is the monument, or the family vault, the Brigg family vault, and all of that. Where all the action happened was over there by the Johnson Monument. But I wanted you to see how far away the Pierce family plot is to the Johnson family plot, and the gate and the vault, and where all the action happened. The grave robbers never made it here. Okay, so now we're at the Johnson family plot. So let's all see who's here. So here I am in front of the Johnson Monument, her memorial family plot. And if we come, we can see right here, there's the Johnson name, James Johnson. James was Thomas's father. very first grave is Thomas. So Thomas, who the body snatchers were trying to steal, here he is. And right next to him is his brother James. And James is one of the brothers who was trying to save his body from the body snatchers. We'll see the other one here in just a minute. But here is James and Thomas. Right here we have Nathaniel. This is the other brother that helped to rescue his brother's body, Thomas's body, from being snatched that night. So we have the three brothers on this side of the monument. So we've got Nathaniel right here. And then right over here we've got James, and the one on the end is Thomas. So Thomas and his two brothers, James and Nathaniel, that were trying to keep Thomas's body from being snatched that night, and were setting guard and watch over his body. Not just that night, but then they did several days beyond as well, making sure his brother's body never got stolen. So we can see back here though, we've got a row of people. Let's go see who that is. So right here we have, this is James Johnson, their father, and his wife, Sarah Johnson, their mother. So there's the two parents right here, and you can even see on the top we've got father and mother. So there we go. And you can see in the background there's the family monument with Johnson, and then you can see the three brothers. So there they are back there. And then next to the parents, we have their daughter, the parents, James and Sarah's daughter, Carrie. She died when she was just 20. So here she is. So they had the three boys. They had 4 boys and actually 4 girls. They had 8 children. The 4 boys are here, and 2 of the 4 girls are here. 2 of them got married. 2 never married. They died when they were young. So this is Carrie, or Caroline. They called her Carrie. She's buried next to her parents. And you can see her brothers, 3 of her brothers in the back. Then we have this broken one. And I'll tell you in a second who I think it is. And then we have this other one on the end that I can't read what it is. But I do know 2 other people who were buried here, and I think this is those 2 people. So here I am. There you can see the parents, James and Sarah. You see Carrie, then we've got the broken one, and then we have this little one here that's not legible. It's difficult to read it. But I think I know who these 2 are. I'm just not sure which is which, but I'm going to take a guess. So in the burial records, there are 2 other people buried in this plot. They have another daughter, Sarah Ann, who died when she was about 31. She is buried here. And then they had a little boy, Edward. Now, Edward was born, according to the 1860 census record, he was just 4 years old. So he would have been born around 1856. Now, in the 1870 census record, he's gone. He's not there. So somewhere between the 1860 census record and the 1870 census record, he died. But we don't know the exact date. I couldn't find a record that showed you. And that's a common thing when you're researching little ones who died in between census records, and you just can't find a death certificate or anything like that, because back in the mid 1800s, even late 1800s, recording burial times and burial records and all of that was just hit or miss, very inconsistent, and not necessarily reliable that would have been recorded properly. So I have a feeling, so he would have died, he would have been at the very youngest, around 4 or 5 when he died, if he died right after the 1860 census record. But if he had lasted till just before the 1870 census record, he would have been about 14, 15. So somewhere in between there, Edward passed away. So I have a feeling, this is my hypothesis of these 2 graves, because I know those 2 people are buried here, that I think this is Sarah Ann, because it matches her sister Carrie's graves podium, like the little thing. and unfortunately her headstone is missing, but the podiums match. So I have a feeling that this is Sarah Ann, her sister, who died at 31. And then I think this is Edward right there on the end. I think the two sisters have the matching, I don't know what you call these, little pedestals for the headstone. And then little Edward is there. That is my hypothesis of who these two are, because I do know in the burial records those two are listed as being buried in this plot. So I think that's them. Okay, so just an overview of the Johnson family plot. There's the monument in the middle. It says Johnson in the front facing the road. Then we've got the three brothers in the back. The three brothers. And then we've got, I think their brother Edward is this one. So the four boys are all here. Then we've got the two of their daughters, the two sisters of the brothers, and the two daughters of James and Sarah Johnson, whose plot this is. I think that's them, and the other two daughters are buried elsewhere. And then next to the daughters are the parents of all the children that are in this plot. So that's James and Sarah Johnson, and that's who's buried here. So let's talk about how they are positioned in relation to where everything was happening in this story. Okay, I'm back in front of the Johnson family plot. And then if we look just over here, look, there's the Brigg family vault, where the George Brown, one of the grave diggers, the African-American grave diggers, the assistant janitor, where he was killed by that family vault. So here is the Johnson family monument. There's the Brigg family vault. And if we look over here, do it carefully so I don't make you dizzy. There's the gate right there. The gate that the grave robbers came through, the gate where their cart and horse stopped, right here. And then here's the Johnson family plot, the Brigg family monument, and then just across the street from the Johnson family plot was where the brothers with William Diebel were sitting underneath a tarp that they had decided they were going to keep watch over their brother's grave and make sure that he wasn't, his body wasn't stolen. And so they were setting guard over here underneath a tarp across from the Johnson family plot. So they were right here near the entrance where the robbers came. And then remember, the robbers came and then they started to dig up Thompson's body, which was right here, Thomas's body, which was right here, buried right here. And then when they got caught and the brothers yelled, "Halt, stop," then they started, some of them pulled up their hands, the doctors did, and the one other African-American janitor guy that was helping them do the stealing, the digging, he stopped and they put up the hands, but the one went running. That was the 18-year-old George Brown, who was shot and killed over here by the Brigg monument. And that's where he died, right next to that monument. So that's where the Johnson plot is located in the course of all the story. Okay, so I just wanted to show you the Brigg monument. I'm right here in front of the John Briggs family vault, family monument, family vault, where the young African-American gravedigger robber George Brown was killed. He was killed, it looks like, from the pictures that I was able to see, around this corner of the side of this monument here, where he was trying to hide. He was killed there. But here is the Briggs family vault. So in relation to the Johnson plot, you can see the Johnson family plot is just right on the end. You see where my finger is? Right here. Right here by the street, right there. This is the family plot. And then here is the Briggs monument. And then the brothers were just right across the street from the Johnson family plot, right about here. Okay, there's the gate that they came through to do the dirty deed in digging up these bodies and stealing them right out from under the noses of their families, or so they thought. So I just wanted to show you the monument. Let's come around the side that supposedly he was killed, and I'll show you that. Here we go. Okay, so I'm around the corner from the front. Here's the street. I'm just around the corner. The gate is that way, so I'm facing the gate. We've got a little piece that has fallen across off the top here that needs to be restored, and there's the piece there. But according to all of the pictures and the accounts, this is the side of the monument, the family vault, that George Brown was shot and killed. Apparently, when the bullet went through him from the rifle bullet, went through him from his back, it came out his front and ended up on the walls of this monument. So pictures that I have seen show it to be right about here in these two spots. And supposedly you were able to still see them. This little mark and this little mark here in the pictures that I saw. I saw what looked like to be shots that had been repaired in that picture. They look like I can't see them now when I'm looking at it here in person, but these are the two things. This mark was there and that mark was there. So this, I think, is the spot where it happened, but it's been repaired, so you can't see it now, apparently. So anyway, but this is supposedly the side of the monument where he was killed, and if we come to the front step, we can see there's the gate, and then here's the front of the monument. One thing I wanted to add, just a little kind of mystery regarding this whole story, is who shot George Brown. There are several different accounts that say it might have been one of the Johnson brothers. The Johnson brothers each thought it was each other, but each one of them said it wasn't me. Diebel, the officers, and then the friend of Edwin Pierce, Hopper, all of them said they came in and left with the same amount of bullets that they came with, and none of their rifles had been shot, because they each all had 12 gauge rifles when they came. None of them had said that they did it. They all denied it, and he was shot from the back. So remember, this is dark. It's in the, it's late at night. It's after midnight by the time that the wagon had come and all this is coming down. It's after midnight. And so it would have been dark here. And this is also a not as well lit up area as it would have been, as it is now. Back in that time, they didn't have the type of lighting that we do now, and they didn't light everything up like we do now, right? And so it would have been hard to see. So it was hard to tell in the scuffle and everything who shot him. Now, the Johnson brothers were saying that it was some other person, that there may have been another person who shot him. The question then remains, why would, if it was somebody that was with them trying to shoot him, did they shoot him by accident trying to hit one of the Johnson brothers? Or were they shooting George Brown to quiet him up? Don't know. Nobody knows who did the shooting. Yeah, nobody knows to this day who actually shot George Brown in the back. Everybody says it wasn't them, and nobody was prosecuted for his death. Yeah, so there's that. Okay, so in order to kind of complete the story and wrap it all up, I just want to share the aftermath of what happened as a result of that attempted grave robbing here in February of 1890. Is that people then were afraid to take out burial permits, and so they started taking out permits to have their loved ones buried in the vaults. There was a city vault here and other vaults to try and have them buried in the vaults. Rather than in the ground, because they were worried that their bodies would get stolen. Another thing that happened too was that the cemetery set up set up security, and so that they would have people guarding the cemetery at night, and they did that for a long period of time, that they would guard the cemetery at night. They would have guards here at nighttime. William Culbertson, who died in June 25, 1892, so a little over 2 years after this incident happened. He had set up, prior to his death, that he would have guards guard his body at night for several months after his death, and he did that. For 2 months after his death, there were guards guarding his grave, his body, making sure that no one stole his body. For 2 months after his death, this was in June of 1892, so that would have lasted probably June to July, July to August. So August, September, the summer, there were people guarding his body here for several months in that summer of 1892, making sure no one stole his body. So just crazy, right? Crazy time, crazy story. But it isn't the only cemetery that happened to. It was a common thing back in those days. The medical schools who were needing to learn the anatomy to teach their students to learn the anatomy, they had to actually have cadavers to be able to take apart and kind of see how the body worked. And so sometimes they would resort to very ghoulish, dastardly things in order to secure those cadavers. Sometimes they would be able to get some who were like people who were unknown, had died along the way, lost, friendless, paupers, things like that, but not always, as you can tell by this story that I just related to you. So here we are. I'm back at the Briggs family vault, where George Brown breathed his last and left the planet. Or did he?